Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Just going over this for new people and people with short-term memories. Back at my other place, anything involving this sort of stuff, repotting, mounting, new orchids coming out of their pots, all that sort of stuff, used to be endearingly called kitchen time because it was always done in the kitchen, which had a good sized worktop with the cooker and then some more worktop. So I had a huge work area. The kitchen I've got in this place isn't big enough. So I got one of these trays and all of those sorts of videos are now done here. But to replace kitchen time, I've used the expression tray time. It's a bit more appropriate because we're not in the kitchen. But for people who are relatively new to the channel, looking for things about repotting, mounting orchids, taking orchids off of mounts, all that sort of thing, a search for kitchen time will actually find most of them, because that was often the main heading, and then the subheading might have been, you know, repotting these Oncidiums or something like that, and often very vague titles, knowing me. That's going to get better next year. Anyway, so these will be called tray time as a main heading, and then a subheading on what I'm actually up to. What I'm actually up to today, we've got two relatively new orchids, both of which were bought, I can't remember when I got the Miltoniopsis. I think I probably got that at my last visit to Burnham's, which would have been what, the Devon Orchid Society show, and the Nellie Isla yellow, which is going over so the spike can come off, that was got at the Wessex Orchid Society show. This is a Epidendrum, Comet Valley Orange Star, that was got many years ago at Malvern and has never grown as well as it was growing then. So, reasons for repotting. These two, I don't know what they're in, and this one's already rotted one bulb. This one, because I don't know what it's in, and I need it out, and now's the time to do it after it blooms, because very soon it should be pushing up a new growth, if it's got any strength left. That's the problem with these two bulb plants. Often the blooming takes the strength out of the plant. I mean, the pseudo bulbs are a bit shriveled, but it might pull on. And then this one, because I'm going to go through the process of repotting everything that was potted up with the coconut husk, simply because it doesn't last that long, and when it starts to break down it turns very acidic and does your roots in. So this part, I always divide these repotting videos into two parts. One is not two videos, just two parts I break off. Clear up the mess basically. But the first part is getting things out of the pot, trimming, taking off old bulbs, trimming roots, all the sort of thing, getting it ready to be potted up or mounted. Then I have a break, clear up all the mess, because there's always mess, and then come back when I've sorted out the media and the pots I'm going to use and everything, and we get them in their pots or on their mounts. So this is the let's get the stuff out of the pot bit. All the old media, for me, just goes out in the hedge now. Now I'm not doing much with these roots. All I'm doing is getting the old media out. Now I know that there are several plants here. I've got a good enough memory that I remember that from when it was last repotted. But there's still no reason to separate them out. The only things I will be trimming off are dead roots. And quite honestly, there's hardly any, but there are some. So this is just a quick trim basically. There's not much to go here. And a lot of the times you're sort of trimming off roots. They wouldn't do any harm if they were left. I don't want to encourage you to never trim dead roots, don't get me wrong. But if in doing so you damage good roots, either because you haven't got decent scissors or you're not a very good shot, I mean, I've done that before. I've aimed at a dead root and got a good one, and then you think, oh blast. And that is really sad if there were only a couple of live roots and you've just cut one of them off. So that's going to do for that. That's just a light trim. There's nothing to take off the plant, but these will come apart. See that? That's not going back in because I don't think that's going to grow. That's okay, and that's okay. But here is a cane that's growing from very low down on the root base and has no leaves. So I'm going to take that off at the root base. And there's a reason for that. I can now plant that deeper without burying that leafless cane. There's no other leafless canes, they've all got leaves on, and we've got 1, 2, 3 new shoots, 2 of which are keikis. So I was just going to say, and I think I've managed to finally get rid of the scale on here, but I've just seen a couple. But this plant went downhill because of the sheer volume of the scale. So that will get planted a bit deeper this time to accommodate the roots on the keikis. So that's that one. Right, what else have we got? We might end up needing that pot. Right, let's do this one now. That needs the spike taken off. And the stake comes out. Spike goes on my rubbish pile over there. That's plant-based rubbish. I just collect a pile there, and every now and again I find a hole to throw it in the garden. Right, I don't know what I'm going to find in here, but for a 2-bulb pot plant, that pot is far, far, far too big, and would therefore be staying wet. Yeah, it's just been plonked in the top. We'd be lucky if this one makes it, quite honestly. But it'll stand a better chance. See, it's got a plug. It's got a solid plug here, in which roots are probably dying. Yeah, be lucky if this one makes it, quite honestly. It's got the cool temperatures. It's got that going for it now in this place. It hasn't got to put up with heat, but it's got very few good roots. And that plug wouldn't have been doing the roots it's got any good at all. It's basically a compacted solid mass of old sphagnum moss from when it was first taken out of a flask as a young plant, wrapped in sphagnum moss tightly, and then grown on in perfect conditions. And you can get away with a solid plug like that if you have those perfect conditions. Right, well, I'm not going to get all of that moss out, but any new roots that grow on here will grow out into the new media very quickly, if I can get any to grow. It's a tiny little old pseudo bulb there that, to pot this properly, would get buried, so we'll just pull that off. So that's what we've got. Not good, but quite honestly, exactly what I was expecting. So just get a bit more of that old moss out. As I said, any new roots that push on should push on quite strongly, and they would push through any loose moss that was left in there, so it's not the end of the world. Right, so that's that one. We certainly won't be reusing that pot. If anybody's thinking about it, again, new to the channel, I always use clear pots because I like to see whether my media is wet or not. And when you've got the number of orchids that I've got, you can't really go by weight because you won't remember how a pot feels. If you haven't got many, if I had half a dozen orchids, I would know each one off by heart, and I would know its weight to be able to tell whether it needs watering or not. I can't do it with the number I've got. So I have clear pots so that I can see what's going on. That's the logic. And I suspect we're into the same game with this. This is 2 separate plants. And this has been planted in effectively peat, or a peat-based, probably substitute. Now this is the one that's got the rotting pseudo bulb. That's got to come off. leaving what's left, which may or may not grow. Difficult to tell, so cut that off at the base, and then I suspect half the roots will come off with it. In fact, it's rotten. It's already rotten at the base. It's already gone. So we're down to one plant now, which has got 2 pseudobulbs, and hopefully hasn't started to rot yet. It does actually have some reasonable roots here. We'll get rid of the dead leaves, which can hold moisture, and there is our new growth just starting. So I will use the scissors to snip that leaf rather than my hands, and that way you should be able to tear it down to the base of the new growth so that it can see daylight, and then any new roots will go down into the media. That's the theory. So this piece might make it. It has got the new growth. It might make it. And I will not go too mad with these roots and this peat. And again, there's the plug. Rotted away and taken the roots with it. Luckily, some of them managed to escape. So this should make it, providing it doesn't rot. But it's not in a good state because it's 2 pseudobulbs. They are joined together, but they are also shriveling. So, you know, already. Now, you might sort of think, well, if it's got good roots, why is it shriveling? It's shriveling because the roots in that media, in my conditions, are almost non-functional, even though they're there. I mean, some of these are dead, but I'm not taking many off because differentiating between dead and live roots on a plant like this is almost impossible. So we will just pop that up and see what happens. And hopefully some of the roots will extend and some new ones will grow from that new growth. Right, so that's our mess. Quite a bit of it. 2 pots. I hate to do it, but I just throw those away because I don't need them, I don't want them, and I have no use for them. So I'd be collecting them for somebody else. I'd have to find somewhere to put them. I'd probably want them washed beforehand. So we do have 3 plants to plant up. The reason these were chosen, 2 were emergency repots, new plants, and the other one is going to go in the same media, so I just wanted to make it a set of 3, even though they're 3 different plants. They will all go in the same media. So I shall have a tidy up, and as the expression goes, I'll be back. Okay, what have we got then? We've got a selection of pots, varying sizes, and you'll find this funny. I was washing what I thought was a pot, and I washed the inside and I washed the outside, and I thought, oh, it's not clean, it must be on the inside. And it's not clean, it must be on the outside. It was 2 pots of almost identical sizes, and one was jammed inside the other one. So the bits I was trying to wash off was between the 2 and it wouldn't come clean. It's driving me up the wall. Never had that before. Right, what this is what I've got. This is the assortment of stuff that I use. That's charcoal, which I add into mixes as recommended by many people, and I still don't know whether it does any good, or what I do know is it probably doesn't do any harm. So that's that. This is highly likely to be what was left over from the last repotting session. Yes, so that's a mix of charcoal, grow stones and small and medium bark. That would almost be suitable as it is for what I'm about to pot. What's in here? I haven't got a clue because I can't see through the bag. May well be the same thing. No, that's leca clay beads. Now the thing is with this lacquer that I bought, it looks the same as everybody else's, but it's not. Basically it doesn't wick. So a lot of people grow in semi-hydro, so they have lacquer beads with a reservoir of water in the bottom, and it wicks up through the lacquer and keeps the roots moist. This doesn't. Basically I had that in a glass with with an inch of water in the bottom, and after 3 days the water had gone up about the same as the water, and the top of the rest of the lacquer was bone dry. So this doesn't wick, and as a consequence it holds very little water, but what it does provide is an awful lot of aeration and drainage because it doesn't hold a lot of water. Now I've got the grow stones. This is some sort of pumice, I would think. It's covered in a almost greasy feel to it, dust. And then what we got over here, this was an emergency buy because I'd run out of bark. I don't normally use that. That is a brand name, and what's in it is what it says. But it is in effect just bark along with branches, bits of wood and stuff. But it's a small to medium bark, and it's okay. It's quite hard. And then in here is peat mixed with silver sand and some grit. Now that got used to repot my carnivorous plants, my Sarcochilus that's outside and my pinguiculars that are inside. And the other thing I've got is down, hang on, is down there. I don't know whether you can actually see it, but it's the Orchiata bag of bark that Lynn gave me, because she had far too much of it and ended up getting some more unintentionally and ended up with far too much. That is, I will get some out because I need some, very small bark, almost seedling bark, could be used for seedling. So that's a very fine bark. Then I've got the next size up. Got some pre-mixed, which I will move to one side because it's not exactly what I want this time. I'm going to leave that there, I'll tell you why in a minute. Yes, I will. And the stones. Right, so let's pick one to do then. And the first one I want to do is this. This is the Epidendrum. Now, to all intents and purposes, under normal circumstances, Epidendrums are either terrestrials or semi-terrestrials. So they're going to want a very fine mix for those roots to get down into. And they're going to need a pot that will accommodate those roots. That's a bit big. Next one down. That's better, so that will do. So I'm going to put some of that in the bottom, because that's the slightly larger stuff. The reason being, it will dry faster because it's got more air around it. These are air cone pots. They have a lot of ventilation around the bottom. So that layer won't stay wet. And then we've got our very fine bark. And to that, we'll add a bit of charcoal. This is where I get my hands dirty, but I'm going to shake it. So we're going to add a bit of charcoal to that. That allegedly helps keep the media sweet. Allegedly, I can't prove it one way or the other. And I've forgotten what was in there, that was lacquer, I don't want any of that. So that's small bark and charcoal so far. And a layer in the bottom that will dry quickly because of the air around the bottom. So what else should we have then? We'll put some stones in because I've got them. They help, they hold a bit of moisture and they help aerate, you know, the media. So they, you know, help keep some air in there and stop it all compacting and squashing down. And then why I kept this out is I'm going to add some of that. And that turns it into a semi-terrestrial mix. I don't want too much simply because I haven't got the warmer temperatures that plant would prefer, but a little bit of that might help the roots go better. So that's what it's going in. So a little bit in the bottom, get our roots in. If your roots don't seem to go right down, twist the pot and they will turn. Don't do it too viciously or you will snap them, but it will get the job done. Lots of tapping will help the media go in between the roots where there's gaps. Notice this media is dry. If this media had been pre-soaked and was wet, tapping it wouldn't make much difference because the pieces just stick to each other. They stick to the side of the pot and they don't go down into all the gaps like what this is doing. I'm going to fill this pot quite deep because, as I said, I want those roots from those keikis to be in the media. I want them to be touching the media so that hopefully they will grow on instead of becoming air roots and not doing so well. I'm just gently going down the sides now to make sure the media is quite tight. Again, I wouldn't normally do that, but we are dealing with a semi-terrestrial. At least it could even be a terrestrial. So that's that one done. I'm not going to put the tag back in because there is no other orchid in here that looks like that. I know what it is and it needs a new tag with the label maker. So that's one done. You can go over there for now. Need to water, which I'll do in a minute. Right, that's one done. There's very little of that peaty stuff left in here, so spread out between the rest of the pots. It won't make any difference basically. Right, now let's have a look at this. Now this has some roots. It's a bit, well, it's not a very good plant basically, but it does have some roots. And the job is for those roots to either start growing better because they're in a newer media, or to encourage some new ones to grow. And that needs to go in a very small pot, so that can go in there. Otherwise it'll just stay too wet. So the mix I've got is okay, except that there's not quite enough there. So we'll have a bit more of the small bark, because that's what a lot, where I was using the coconut husk before, I was using that to help keep roots moist a bit longer and save me watering them so often. Unfortunately, carrying that round into this environment was detrimental to the roots because it was not staying wet a bit longer, it was staying wet a huge amount longer. Therefore the moisture in those pots was getting stale before the plant could use it because there was no temperature there. So we're not doing that now. So we won't be using the cocoa husk anymore basically. We'll just be using other stuff. This one may or may not make it. It has a good chance of making it because it does have some roots. They're not very good, but they're there. And the next thing this should do is produce a new growth. And if it's got enough strength, a root system as well. But it might produce a weak new growth and therefore a weak root system, and it'll have to survive until the next one comes. But not too tight, and with Oncidium types, which this is, don't bury the base of the bulb. If you've got good temperatures and they're growing like little rockets, you get away with it. But if your temperatures aren't so good, the base of the plant will stay wet and these outer leaves will start to rot because they're constantly wet, and it'll get into the base of the plant and take the plant down. You've been warned. See, in the nurseries they don't care about such things because they're normally coming into bloom or in bloom, and they'll be sold while they're in bloom. If they don't sell them, they throw them away because they have no value once the blooms have gone. So that's that little one. And then we've got the one with the new growth, just about, not a very good one, and again some roots. So that can go in the next size up. That can go in that one. Now again, we'll put some of the bigger bark in, so that we provide a layer that won't get wet. The idea of this layer that doesn't get wet is that if the roots get down in it, it will serve a purpose. There is somewhere for the roots to go if they get that long, but they won't stay soggy. Because where are the root tips? They're on the end of the roots, aren't they? So if they're in the soggy layer at the bottom because you used all fine stuff, and it's a bit cold, and it's not growing perhaps as well as it should, that's where the roots rot. Always in the bottom of the pot first, and then works its way upwards. I suppose we better have a bit of the small stuff on top. Give the roots a chance. And you see why I did all these three together, because apart from adding that little bit of peaty stuff in, they've all gone in the same media, as near as damn it. So, you know, it works that way. If I was doing 3 or 4 that needed different media, like if there was a cattleya in here, I'd be using large chunky bark and nothing else added, just the bark on its own. You know, if I was using a chunky rooted other type of plant, Celogeny or something, it would have a different media yet again. So these 3 were roughly all the same media and all needed doing. Now, I haven't got quite enough, so I'm just going to top it up with the small bark. Doesn't need all the additives around the top. That's just for surface roots coming out of the plant to get into prior to getting down into the media proper. And that wasn't a bad guess, because we've virtually used it all up. And we've got media just round the base of the plant again, and just round the base of that new growth, so that if it does produce some new roots, they'll get straight into the media. Now I've got to remember which one was which. Well, one's a Nelliela and one's a Miltoniopsis. I can't remember. I've always got the video where I took the tags out before I split them up. So there we go. That's a repot on 3. I was going to say the first of the year, but we haven't actually got through New Year yet. But there's a lot to do, and I needed to make a start, because I'll probably be doing repotting now every few days. I wouldn't try and do them every day because I will get fed up, and if I get fed up I'll get slapdash, because I'll just be bored with the whole subject, if you see what I mean. So that's how I like to do repotting. Do several at a time based on the fact they need the same media, and get them all done together. One lot of mess. You know, you're going to have a mess even if you only repot one plant. If you repot a set of plants, it's still only one lot of mess, isn't it? That's the way I look at it. Yes, so there we go. 3 repots. They're not. These 2 are very similar plants. The Nelliela has got quite a bit of Miltoniopsis in it as a cross, and the Miltoniopsis hybrid, they need the same care across the board. They both need cool temperatures, the smallest amount of air movement. If you blast them with a fan, they dehydrate. They're not too keen on it. And shade lovers, basically, so not too bright, you know, medium light, I would say. I go off the expression heavy shade for plants in the UK, because that's like dark. So I call it medium light. Medium light in the UK is equivalent to quite shady in other parts of the world where the light is far more intense. So there we go. First repot after Christmas, and there will be more to come. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by.